One of the you have a lot of good phrases and terms, and one of them I liked. I'll maybe steal it. I'll borrow it. I'll let people know I got it from you. But you because this will preach, so to speak, to even people who are very convinced by everything you're saying. You talk about, obviously, to have an affair is very damaging to a marriage and often ends a marriage. But you have these two interesting phrases: lesser infidelities and attractive alternatives. And you're talking about people who maybe it's the first step toward a in-person affair, or maybe it's just not just, maybe it's an unhealthy eating away at the marriage. What do you mean by these, and what are the dangers for people listening who say, of course I don't want to go, commit adultery. I know that's bad, but a lesser infidelity and attractive alternative. How do those creep up into marriages in really damaging ways?
Yeah, so my colleague Jeff Dew and I have done some work on on the internet, basically. And what we see is that a decent minority of Americans today are like having some kind of interaction with an old flame, someone they dated in high school or in college, and they're not married to, they're married to someone else, right? I think that's kind of potentially like a lesser infidelity. And we mentioned that people who are doing that are less happy in their marriage. And we don't know exactly why it's the case, but it's certainly the kind of thing, if you want to strengthen your marriage, probably not a good idea to spend a lot of time
Right.
hanging out with your old boyfriend or girlfriend, on Facebook or some other, Instagram platform. So I think just being kind of careful, both in person, but also online today, not to be cultivating relationships with people who are appealing and attractive in some way to you, and would take your time and attention away from your wife or your husband. So that's sort of that reality. Be prudent. And I think when it comes to like travel for work, when it comes to other situations, just having some kind of norm that you have for yourself or with your spouse that you worked out that governs how you handle situations where you could get into trouble. And I think drinking obviously would be another example of that. But just situations where I think especially corporate travel is one place where people can get into trouble. Or when they're traveling again with male friends or female friends away from their spouse, as with Governor Mark Sanford, people can kind of get into situations where they're making bad choices that end up hurting their marriages. So part of the virtue of prudence, I think, is undervalued in this context.
Yeah, it baffled me when there was, such an uproar, several years ago with Mike Pence rule, which was, first the Billy Graham rule that you don't have a meal with someone other than your spouse. And I suppose there's, a setting, you're on a work trip and there's three of you and you're at a restaurant and, but it does, I just can't fathom that my wife would appreciate or think it's a good idea to say, you know what, we don't need these prudish sort of rules, and I want to really honor you and your independence and everything. That I'm sure it's fine. And even I come across some Christians who want to valorize, that men and women can be friends, and of course they can be friends, and we don't
Sure.
want to be, weird about it as if every a man, every woman is, some Potiphar's wife, temptress or something. That's
Right.
not a way to relate to women or to honor them. But it is the case that I can't imagine my wife ever saying, you know what, Kevin, I wish you would just have more close relationships with other women in your life, or I'm so happy, if you would have this meaningful interaction online that I don't see anything. But somehow both men and women convince themselves that they're the ones who won't get burned by it, or it's just a little bit of fun. And here, maybe the pastor preacher in me is coming out, but I appreciate when someone from another discipline points to the same realities, because this does, even from purely, self-centered reasons, this is not going to end in greater happiness for you.
Right.